Week 14 left a lot of questions to be asked and a lot of answers from the College Football Playoff Committee to be made on Tuesday. And the committee made their answers known when they placed Alabama over teams like Miami, Ole Miss, and South Carolina at that 11 spot and into the College Football Playoff, leading the public into a outrage. It seemed like a lot of people upset, claiming the Alabama bias, the SEC bias for the 9-3 Crimson Tide over a team like 10-2 Miami, 9-3 Ole Miss, and 9-3 South Carolina. Now, here's my big thing with this: is a lot of people are very upset, and I understand it. You know, Alabama's they've kind of benefit off their name, and they are 9-3. A lot of people believe that a three-loss team should not be playing for a national championship come December and January. And I mean, you can understand it, but from my perspective, here's what I think. We're gonna move it on, and we're gonna show you these resumes. Here's why Alabama in the playoff was gonna be inevitable if this in this situation. However, I will say personally, I was rooting for South Carolina or Ole Miss to get in there. Did I think they were going to get in there? Probably not. But with Alabama making it at that 11 spot, this really kind of puts Alabama in the playoff if SMU wins. I think if SMU loses, that's the only chance that they don't make it. So we're gonna head on to some of these resumes. I want to give first off a big shout out to CFP Resume Rankings on Twitter or X. This guy's makes some great stuff on here. While we're at it too, I'm gonna make sure I move my camera so then we can be able to show more of what's going on in there. But he's got ranking resumes, raw resumes, comparing resumes, and I mean we're gonna go through all of this. So we're gonna start off with just in general. That's what the chart looks like. If y'all wanted to know what it looked like at all, and then here is the next one. Here is the all possible resumes, and this is my big thing I want to talk about. Here, one second, let me move that face cam real quick. There you go, guys. Let's put it down here, and here it is. And I think the biggest thing that stands out, as he says, is Tennessee and Indiana stand out very, very crazily. You know, you've got everyone ranked on basically their overall resume, their strength resume, and their raw resume. Right, Texas, Oregon, Georgia, three guaranteed. You know, those teams make sense. I mean, Texas and Oregon's there. If they don't win, those both make sense. I mean, all these teams up here make a lot of sense. From SMU to Texas, all these three teams, what is it? There's like maybe 7 teams in there, 6 teams in that, the bunch. But then here's the thing that I really catches my eyes: Tennessee's 10-2, and they are the number 17 in the country. And look at how far down they are. They are below South Carolina. They're right above Ole Miss. That strength resume, they're very impressive when it comes to the strength. But their raw resume, not as great. However, Tennessee deserves to be in. They're 10-2. They played well. I mean, those games that they lost, maybe shouldn't have lost those games, especially the game against Arkansas. Maybe the Georgia one's a little bit more reasonable. But and then here's everybody's least favorite team, Alabama. Look how high up they are. They're almost the exact same overall resume. I mean, 1 point under SMU if they win the ACC championship. And then obviously if SMU loses the ACC championship, they're kind of knocking down. I mean, you look at SMU, I think their best wins is kind of very similar to Miami. You know, their only loss on the year was a very good BYU team to start the season, and that's another thing with me is BYU, despite having 2 losses, I think they're being a little bit underrated. Do I think BYU was going to make the playoff regardless? No. But the fact that they're right there within Miami, less than a point, I think that's something that people are kind of shrugging off, and I don't think that's something you can shrug off. But you look at those 4 teams. Let's go back to those 4 teams. South Carolina's above Ole Miss. Ole Miss did beat South Carolina, though, so I think it's kind of hard to say South Carolina deserves to be over them, despite South Carolina finishing with a 6-game winning streak, and they've beaten a lot of great teams, you know. And then Alabama up there, and then Miami's the lowest. So let's go into these individual charts a little bit. I want to start with the two teams that are right there, 11 and 12. Basically eliminating Miami from playoff contention and putting Alabama in the playoff with Ward Manuel what he said, a lot of the things he came out and talked about was those wins against top 25 teams, a lot of those wins against top 500 or better teams, those wins recently. I mean, I don't believe those are the right things to base it off of, as if like just like CFP resume rankings just says right here, uh, the record subjective to top 25 and record over 500 teams are not the right way to use this ranking, especially when there's data like this. And I mean, once again, this guy is fantastic. These guys are fantastic putting this all together. But the Alabama's total resume rank is number 7 out of in the country. They have the 7th best resume in the country, despite being 9-3. I think that's something that you kind of have to look at. They have the 5th best strength and the 10th best raw resume. They've got good wins. South Carolina, we've just talked about them. South Carolina is a red hot team. They have not lost a game since losing to Alabama. So that, I mean, having that win against South Carolina is a very shaky one. I mean, they almost lost the game, which was kind of crazy. But then they also have wins against. They have a blowout against LSU, who finished the season 8-4, I believe. And then Missouri. I mean, Missouri, I don't think they deserve to be ranked, but Missouri's 9-3. So you kind of, Missouri didn't really play a very good schedule, but they smoked Missouri at home. And then obviously the big kicker is that Georgia game where they went and they dominated the first half and they almost gave it up, but they ended up winning against Georgia. They've got good wins on their schedule, but then you look at some of these other games, like that Vanderbilt loss. You lose to a 6-6 Vanderbilt on the road when you're the number 1 team in the country. That's gonna impact you. That Tennessee game, I don't really affect that a lot. I mean, obviously it's a loss, so I still look at it in a different way than a win, but I don't really think it's that impactful. As you see, they have a minus 2.45 game value on this game against Tennessee. And then you look at that Oklahoma game, I think this impact should be even bigger because Oklahoma was 5-5 going into that game, and you were a double-digit favorite. You should 100% win those games. I know it's hard to win on the road, but you're playing a 5-5 Oklahoma who doesn't even have 5 wide receivers. They're five of their wide receivers are hurt. That's what I meant. That's what I mean. And I think they should have been impacted more in the rankings from that. I believe they dropped from 7 to 13. I don't know. I just think that was a little bit too little of a drop for Alabama. However, their resume is impressive in my opinion. They show that they can play the right way, and we'll dive deep into Alabama and Miami a little bit more once we get done comparing the two. But and then let's get into Miami with this comparison. I mean, they've got really good wins against a Florida team that didn't look great at the beginning of the season, but they were finished off pretty well. They also have a win against South Florida, so that's a common opponent. So they've both got wins, them and Bama. They've had some games where they kind of got saved. Virginia Tech, California, both of those games had calls that people believe should have gone the other way, and a lot of things could have gone the other way. They do have their best win against Louisville. They had an absolute great win against a bad Florida State. Louisville and Duke are their 2 best wins on the year, though. That's the big concern. No wins against a top 25 team, and then obviously, I know that I think it's kind of scary. Bama does have those wins against those better programs. And then obviously the 2 out of 3 losses, I don't think that should be the reason why you discredit a team like Miami. Just because you lose 2 out of your last 3 games doesn't mean. I mean, like, look, Bama lost 2 of their 3 games in the middle of the season. They lost to Vanderbilt. They lost to Vanderbilt and they lost to Tennessee at the middle of the season. It is a little different though because Tennessee is the number 7 team in the country, and Miami lost to Georgia Tech and Syracuse. But I just think it's kind of disrespectful in a way to the team, to Miami's season, to claim that just because they finished bad at the end of the year means Alabama at 9-3 should be ahead of them. However, I do truly believe Alabama is the right team in the playoff. Maybe not what I want, but it's the right team in the playoff. For an example, let's jump into a different team, SMU, who is currently playing for their ACC championship, who really could be on the wrong side of this Alabama ranking come conference championship week, and they lose. SMU's got good wins against an 8-4 TCU, a good win against Louisville. They've got a good win against Duke. They've got those very similar games. They didn't really play those high-powered teams in the ACC that you would have thought they would. And I mean, they're only ranked. I think their only ranked matchup at the time, maybe Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was ranked, so I think they are 1-1 against ranked teams this season. No, 2-1 because of Louisville. So I believe it is 2-1, maybe 3-1 with the Duke game, with their only loss being to BYU. And I think there's a world where SMU loses to Clemson and they don't make the playoff. And I think that's not acceptable, honestly. SMU's got the 8th total resume rank, 7th raw, and 11th strength. And I mean, that's a team that 100% deserves to be in the college football playoff, win or loss in the conference championship, because they are playing in a conference championship. I think the fact that the 13 game is that impactful for benefiting a team, it should be not as impactful for hurting a team. I mean, SMU's playing in a game to win their conference, and Bama's not, And if Bama finds a way to make it over SMU, I think that'd be laughable. I think this is the only team that I would argue that Bama doesn't deserve to be over. Despite Bama having a 9-3 record, and as we said, Miami has a 10-2 record. Competing for a conference championship and losing in that conference championship should not put you below a team that is on the border of making the playoff and is a 3-loss team when you're a 1-loss team, now a 2-loss team because of the loss in the conference championship. That should not kick you out for the team that's 9-3 that didn't have to play for a conference championship because they weren't good enough. That went 5-3 in their conference. I think that's laughable. So SMU, I think, should be a surefire. We all know those sure locks. No Holmes. The locks, we've got Oregon. We've got Texas. We've got Georgia. We've got Ohio State. We've got Indiana. We got Penn State. We got Tennessee. We got Notre Dame. And then you've got SMU or Clemson. You've got Boise State or UNLV. You've got Arizona State or Iowa State. And then the committee believes that the other team, is going to be Alabama. And I agree if SMU wins their conference championship, because the Big 12 champ and the Mountain West champ are both winning ins. If you lose, you're done. Even for Boise State, who's ranked 10, you're out. The conference champ is the only one making the playoff. And then SMU, I believe, should make it. But let's move on into these 4 teams that we've been talking about: Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. We'll start with Alabama. Obviously, we saw this chart. We're just going to put it back on the board so everyone can see. Alabama, man, I mean, they're good. I mean, they're a good team. They've been not very impressive, I'd say, this year. Here, let me fix that. Towards the stretch in some of their games. I mean, Oklahoma was a terrible game. That LSU game, the win, though, was phenomenal for them. Missouri, they absolutely beat down on them. I think that's phenomenal. And South Carolina, despite barely sneaking away, a lot of people thought South Carolina was going to be a bad team or not a great team this year. And I mean, look at them; they're 9-3 now. So I think that South Carolina game, it was blown out of proportion. But Bama does have the best resume in the college football playoff race for those 4 teams, and I really do think that they deserve it out of the 4. And then I said with SMU better make it over them, regardless of where SMU ends in their conference championship. But the thing I want to talk about most is just, man, with Alabama, this is what this whole video is about. The title is about Alabama. This is why Alabama was put into the rankings. Yes, they have the name of Alabama, right? They are Alabama. They're the Crimson Tide. So, the committee is going to kind of give them a little bit of treatment because they are Alabama. And I think that is what's getting on so many people's nerves, is that Alabama, is getting into the spot at 9-3. And people are like, they have 3 losses. Why is Bama in here? The biggest thing that people don't realize is that there has been a lot of teams with 3 losses. Every year in the college football playoff era, there has been a team with 3 losses ranked in the top 12. It just so happens that now we have a 12-team playoff, So, obviously, 3-team playoffs, two-loss teams, 3-loss teams weren't making the 4-team playoff because it was only 4 teams, There was going to be 4 undefeated and 1-loss teams in the country that would be like, okay, those are the 4 best teams other than 2014. I still have a grudge against the committee for not selecting TCU despite Ohio State winning the college football playoff, but 3-loss teams are going to be in. I believe there's 22 3-loss teams have finished in the top 12 to finish on selection day. On selection day, top 12 has had 22 teams with 3 losses in the college football playoff era. And this is what, year 11 of the college football playoffs. And we're just now, since we're 12 teams, we're complaining about it. I don't know. I think people don't realize that, and that's why I'm kind of out here saying that. But Alabama truly does have the best resume out of these 4 teams because of the strength of schedule they play, their their raw resume, and then combining that together, how valuable the games are that they played and lose. I get it. They lost to an unranked Oklahoma by 21. Only scored 3 points. Their first time not scoring a touchdown in how long? I think it was like since 2011 or something, 2010. But you gotta look at it, dude. It's gonna happen. And the biggest argument is, why isn't it Ole Miss or South Carolina? And we talked about Miami. I think the reason Miami's not getting in is because of their strength of schedule. Their strength of schedule is not that high. They are not ahead of any of the three teams due to the committee putting them at 12. And I mean, they have not beaten a ranked team. And I think their strength of schedule was what, 30, around the 30s, around. I mean, it wasn't that great, I guess. But we've talked enough about Miami. Let's go into the 2 SEC schools that I really want to talk about the most. By the way, Cam Ward better be a finalist for Heisman. Ole Miss. This team is a good one to talk about because, we talked about the 2 out of 3 losses. They also lost 2 out of 3 towards the middle of the year. 1 to Kentucky and 1 in overtime to LSU. Now, they also lost that Florida game. But here is my big kicker with Ole Miss. Their total resume rank is 11. They are 4 spots under Alabama. And how I value Ole Miss is, I mean, they played a very bad non-conference. Furman, Middle Tennessee State, Wake Forest, and Georgia Southern. Bama didn't play much better. However, I think that happens in the SEC. But I think some of the teams that Bama played are better than some of the Group of 5 teams that Ole Miss played. I'm not comparing Group of 5 teams. I'm comparing who you played in your conference. And you see some of those games. The big win against South Carolina is their big kicker and one of their big kickers. But obviously the biggest one for Ole Miss is that win against Georgia. Them and Alabama both have wins against South Carolina and Georgia. So then you go, oh, where are the other common things? Well, they beat Oklahoma. Alabama lost to Oklahoma. They lost to LSU. Alabama beat LSU. They lost to Florida. Alabama didn't play Florida. Like stuff like that. But I think the biggest thing was that the loss to Kentucky at the beginning of the year was bad. I mean, it was bad. You can't lose to a team like Kentucky. And I think there was really no path for them. I like Ole Miss as a team. I like Jackson Dart. I like Lane Kiffin. I just never really saw them as a team that would jump Alabama. And a lot of people are outraged by that. And I think it's just because their losses aren't quality losses. And I know I hate to compare losses because, Bama has 2 unranked losses and Ole Miss had a loss. I don't know if LSU's ranked. I don't even think LSU's ranked. So they have 3 unranked losses, but I think LSU was ranked then, so it doesn't count. So it's 2 unranked losses to Kentucky and Florida. But I don't know. I think all the Ole Miss fans arguing that that Alabama got smoked by Oklahoma. You lost to Kentucky, dude. Like, you lost to Kentucky. What was that? They have 1 or 2 conference wins this year. I just don't think Ole Miss's 9-3 resume is as impactful as Alabama's 9-3 resume because Alabama does have just more. They just have more strength to their resume. And then my favorite out of the 3, the one that I actually really wanted to be in the conference, in the playoff, is South Carolina. They have those losses against Ole Miss and Alabama, which I agree with how they did this. They don't get any impact from those 2 losses. I don't think at all. I think those don't negate them that well. They were not expected to win those games, especially the Alabama game. They almost came back and won with that fantastic Nick Harbor catch. And then they got the onside. But then that Ole Miss game was ugly. So I feel like they could have said it was kind of negative. But then that LSU game, I don't think we'd be having this conversation if Lenore Sellers stays hurt, doesn't get hurt, stays healthy in the LSU game. I think they come out of that game winning it. I think LSU kind of did get favored by the refs in that game. So the resume rank is 9. I definitely do think if they won against LSU, South Carolina would be a top 10 team in the country. We wouldn't be having this debate. They'd be in. But because they lost that game, things happen in football. Stuff happens. Everything's gonna go your way. So, and for this example, you had an injury happen. So you got to go through and find a way to win a game. They tried to find a win a game. They did miss a kick, I believe, in that game, which they did end up losing by 3. So that could be a big factor of why they lost the game. But they do have very good wins against a lot of teams, especially towards the end of the year. They had the very good wins against A&M. Vanderbilt when they were 6-3 or 5-3 or 5-2 or something like that. Big win against Missouri, and then a big win against their rival Clemson, which is the big thing that I thought was a little questionable. Was South Carolina beat the number 12 team in the country and only moved up 1 rank, and Alabama beat an unranked Auburn and went up 2. So that's where I think you can kind of raise your eyebrow a little bit at and be like, wow, well, South Carolina just beat a ranked team and they're the same record as Alabama, but they only went up 1. But Alabama went up 2 for beating an unranked Auburn. Yeah, I get that is very skeptical. But at the end of the day, you can't lose to the 2 teams ahead of you. That's the big thing. Is you lost Ole Miss, you lost Alabama, you lost to the 2 teams right ahead of you in the rankings. Obviously not anymore because Bama skipped Miami, but that's just how it goes, man. And I think it's just how the committee views it. Is those head-to-head wins are important, and your strength of schedule is very important. So I really do think South Carolina would cause damage with that 6-game winning streak and everything, but Alabama is going to be in this playoff if come an SMU conference championship because Alabama has the best resume. I mean, we can go back to this. This is the biggest debate, I think, from yesterday's rankings show, and everything just leans a little bit more towards Alabama, and that's just how it is. And we're gonna see a 9-3 team in the playoffs this year. We're gonna see one in them next year. There ain't much to do about it. So, anyways, that's gonna be it for this one. Let me know what you guys think about this whole playoff situation. If you think it's legitimate, if you think it's like they still shouldn't be in, who you thought should have made it, let me know down in the comment section. Also, if you enjoyed this content, subscribe for more. We like to do mock drafts, trying to get into more of the general football discussion, as I do love talking sports, and you know the name, Wood Talk Sports. But yeah. Hope you enjoyed this one, and if you also want to comment down below, or I might have a community tab question poll. We're going to be doing our draft profiles first. I've got a couple guys in mind, players like Walter Nolan, Drew Aller, some of those players that I just kind of want to spotlight and talk about for the NFL draft. Just let me know who you guys think would be a good one. If you have one, put it down in the comments, or as I said, I'll put a pull down in the community tab. So, and that'll be it for us today. A mock draft coming within the next couple days. I'm just kind of still doing a little bit more research on what I think I want to change up. And yeah, that's going to be it for today. I'll see y'all next time.